Hi, I'm Sydney.
And I'm Jake.
And you're listening to Two for the Matinee.
Today we'll be talking about Gallipoli and some other stuff.
So, spoiler warning, because these movies are about to get spoiled.
Well, speaking of crazy guys.
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson. Crazy guy Mel.
Crazy guy Mel.
Should we have seen that coming? Should we have seen that coming back then, back in 1981 or whenever Gallipoli was made?
He doesn't even play that crazy in this movie.
But could we see it in the eyes?
I mean, he does have crazy eyes. Yeah.
So tell us about Gallipoli, Sydney.
Gallipoli is a 1980 movie directed by Peter Weir, starring Mel Gibson and is it Mark Kerr? Is that who it is? Did I get that right? Mark Kerr?
The blonde guy?
Yeah.
Mark Lee, sorry.
I was close. Is Mark Kerr an actor?
There's a Bill Kerr in the movie.
Oh, maybe that's what I did. I had put those two. Okay. Stars Mel Gibson and Mark Lee as two young Australian runners who join the army to fulfill a sense of adventure and a sense of duty. And they get more than they bargained for when they discover that war isn't as glorious or as glamorous as they have been led to believe.
Well, it also features Bill Hunter.
Yes.
From Muriel's Wedding and Strictly Ballroom.
Yes.
And Adventures of Priscilla. So I didn't know anything about this movie. I thought it was going to be a boring war movie, and boy, was I wrong. Not only is this movie super interesting, it's beautifully shot. And I wouldn't even call it a war movie. Like we were talking about classic adventure movies.
Yeah.
Like 90% of this movie is an adventure.
It's a buddy adventure.
There's adventures of running. There's adventures walking through the desert. There's adventures riding trains. There's adventures in Egypt.
Yeah.
Just adventures.
Yeah. And the adventure that they're going to, that they think isn't the adventure. The adventure is everything before that.
Yeah. So Mark Lee, he's this, how old is he? He's like 18 or 20 or something. He's too young to sign up, but he's super excited about this war that's going on. It's World War I. Australia's fighting with England, and Australia's in the Turkish theater of combat, and he's super psyched to go, and he's willing to do anything to join up, even though the age of joining up was 21 at that point.
Yeah, he's too young.
And he runs into Mel Gibson.
Well, also he's a promising sprinter.
Right. He's a promising sprinter. And when we see his first race, so like that opening scene I thought was really great, where he's racing on foot versus a guy and a horse. And they're racing through the outback. And then all of a sudden, Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygen kicks in. And I was like, what the fuck? What did you think of that? Yeah, well, that synth song, yeah, it's really famous.
I got to rewind this because I watched this movie. I was about maybe 14 years old. It came on one night on HBO and I didn't know what the hell it was. I was just up and I watched this. So I remember when that music kicked in, when they're running, it was so like there was just a disconnect for a minute because you can obviously tell this is set in the early 1900s. So it's like 1915. So you're like, what the hell is going on?
So I've actually seen Jean-Michel Jarre live. He's like a really famous electronic synth guy, musician.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I love this Oxygen. It's a beautiful piece. But like you said, it was very like jarring. And I think it could have worked because he uses it multiple times throughout the movie, but it almost feels like this weird setup to some sort of like motif or theme, but it never felt like it paid off. It always felt kind of out of place. And I don't know, maybe if like he'd used more of it or different other synth pieces like throughout the movie, it just felt odd. Like, and he used it every time they were running, I think, right? Except at the very end. So I think it was almost like this weird setup that never got paid off. But I thought it was interesting that he used it. I also like the story. The way the story is structured kind of felt like Full Metal Jacket in a way. I don't know if you felt that way. Full Metal Jacket, I thought all the interesting stuff that happened in that movie was before they went to war. Like that whole basic training thing, I thought was the highlight of that movie. Similarly to here, where it's like all the stuff that came before the war was to me the most interesting and the most beautifully shot. Like those scenes of the desert were amazing. The fact that they were filming around the pyramids.
I know, right? And I mean, you could never do that now. It would never look the same. But amazingly, in 1980, you could still imagine that the pyramids looked like that in 1915.
It was just a wonderful imaging of these guys like doing their basic training, like and playing rugby around the pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like they're in the background. It's like no big deal. That was just tremendous filmmaking.
I think the impact of this film, it's underrated. I think in America and Australia, this is like one of their touchstones of like Australian cinema, you know. And I think more people should definitely watch this one.
I mean, it feels like, and I hope this doesn't sound weird, but it's almost like their Vietnam movie, right? Because it was, I mean, I don't know what Australian perception of World War I is, but at least of Gallipoli, and I looked into it. I mean, it's fairly accurate in the sense that it was like this meaningless slaughter of Australians.
Yeah, for a piece of land that didn't really mean anything.
Right. So, you know, we've had a slew of Vietnam movies, and it was like this tragedy in American warfare where it's, you know, a lot of people would argue was senseless loss of life. And so you have that here. So I could see it having the same sort of effect on Australian society or culture.
Yeah, I think World War I movies are very interesting. We don't make them, Americans, I mean, because we really didn't have the same sort of generational effect here that it had for Europe. But I always find it interesting because it's like legitimate trauma, like national scale trauma that we're still feeling the effects of indirectly.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you look at just like total loss of life, World War II is still at the top. But just I remember from like history class, I mean, World War I is when they introduced like mechanized warfare, chemical warfare. So there was just unprecedented level of brutality that no one had seen before.
And that's why when the boys are talking about how this is going to be an adventure, we know with hindsight that it's not an adventure. We know that it's a slaughter. But in their minds, they still have these glorious ideas of like the empire and the freaking charge of the light brigade and all that. It's like the glory of the empire fighting. And that's not what they're going to.
And so one of the things that comes up in this movie, which I don't know, I wonder if maybe they should have played it up more a little bit, is that tension between like why, like some of these guys are saying like, why as Australians, why are we going to go fight for the empire? And our main character, Archie, doesn't seem concerned with that. He's just overwhelmed with the idea of adventure.
Yeah, he's very naive.
So that brings us to the ending. So the ending could have gone two ways here, right? Because what happens is the English, they're basically in charge of this campaign in Turkey. And they want to use the Australians as a distraction so that their forces can land somewhere else in the vicinity and like take some land. But the only way to do this is to just throw bodies at the Turkish trenches. So there's going to be a slaughter. Like that seems pretty obvious to us as the audience. It turns out, so the communication wire between the Australian forces and the British higher up officers is broken. So they need a runner to relay messages. And so obviously there's a choice of either Archie or Mel Gibson's character.
Frank.
Is it Frank? Archie or Frank?
Mm-hmm.
And Archie's famous because he's the winner of the, what did he win? He won something.
The Pan Pacific Grand Prix Amateur 5 Latin Dance Contest.
Wait, was he in one of those? Was he in the dancing?
No.
Or was that a joke?
That was a joke.
Okay. So Archie's the first choice because he's well known for winning some races. And, but Archie says, no, take Mel instead because, you know, he's just as fast as I am. And I talked him into this whole thing. So just let him be.
And he knows he's scared. He knows Frank is scared.
He knows Frank is scared. So my question is, but, you know, I think they could have written it the other way where he's like, take him. They're like, no, you're the best. You're going. Right. I mean, it's a creative choice here. So my question is, what is more devastating? Having so what ends up happening is Mel Gibson ends up being the runner. He actually gets good news, but he's too late in delivering it. So Archie and the rest of the gang that's left there gets slaughtered.
Well, it's actually pretty dramatic because he runs to headquarters, then he runs back, and then he makes the suggestion like, why not go over his head? So then he has to run back to another guy who's like, fine, you're right. Let's call this off. When the same moment he gets the phone call, like, the British have landed, they're having tea on the beach. Like, what? So they're not even taking any fire. So then he has to run back to tell them, no, stop it. We don't even need to do this anymore. And he doesn't make it. They go over.
Well, and also the line gets fixed. So the mid-ranking British officer instructs the Australians to go ahead with the assault.
Right.
Even though he knows it's going to be
and even though the guy above him has already been like, no, which is the perfect example of how futile and stupid the entire conflict was.
Yeah. Yeah. But my question is, so then Archie ends up getting killed, and obviously it's traumatic because it's this 18, 19-year-old kid who's super naive, and, you know, we've fallen in love with him over the course of the film, and he gets killed, and we're super sad. And Mel Gibson, who's his best friend, is obviously sad, and he's probably going to have some survivor's guilt because he's the one who ran instead of him. But what if it had gone the other way, right? And what if it was Archie who ran and Mel Gibson got killed? And then Archie has to live with the fact that he talked this guy into joining the war who didn't want to join the war, but he did it. He got talked into it, and now he's dead. So which one would have been sadder?
To be fair, I think Archie would have made it back.
So that's an interesting point. Archie is somewhat faster. He's a little faster. So you think he would have made it back?
I think he would have made it back.
So the tragedy is, by trying to do the right thing, Archie screwed himself.
Yeah.
In a way. That's one of the tragedies.
I've always thought that. I've always been like, if Frank had let Archie go, if Archie hadn't tried to, you know, step in and like save Frank, so to speak.
Yeah.
Then he probably would have made it back. But to be fair, would Archie have, even if he come back, would he have had the chutzpah to say to the commander, why not go over his head? I don't think he would have.
So yeah, it's almost like a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, it's sad, man. The first time I saw this movie, I cried like a baby.
Yeah, I kind of wish it was just like they just cut it off once they leave Egypt. The end. And then it's just a great adventure movie. It's not sad, but life isn't like that.
No, and I think I'm really happy that you had no idea what the movie was about, because the ending is really famous and you didn't know about it. So you get the shock of not knowing what's going to happen, because I mean, the music cuts out and he's running and you're thinking he's going to make it.
Oh no, what? He's running into machine gun fire. I did not think he was going to make it, because even if he reached the other side, they just fucking kill him right there.
You know, some guys did make it to the other side.
Well, they didn't. There was a rumor that this guy spread because he was an idiot.
Yeah.
No one made it to the other side.
That's true.
Also, interestingly, that ending shot of Archie getting shot to death is like on like the cover, or at least one of the covers of the movie. It's like a black and white kind of thing, but you don't know what it is until you see the end, and you're like, well, they gave it away, but I had no idea.
Yeah, I have this on VHS. That's how long ago I bought this. I don't even have a VHS machine anymore.
I'm kind of surprised. I was looking up Markley's filmography. I'm surprised he wasn't like a bigger star, because I thought he did a really good job, and he had like that rugged handsomeness. Like I could see him doing bigger and better things, but alas, he did not.
No, it was Mel Gibson who became the superstar.
So I'm looking up Markley and Wikipedia. He starred in the 1987 Australian television drama Vietnam, one of Nicole Kidman's early roles, and the 1988 gay cult classic The Everlasting Secret Family. And then he started as a gay man in Sex as a four-letter word. He also worked with James Belushi in the remake of Sahara. I don't even know what that is. Never heard of it. Yeah.
Well, Sahara's a war movie. Well, I don't know if it's the same Sahara, but it's a movie with Humphrey Bogart where a tank crew gets stranded in the North Africa.
Yeah, it's a remake of that, because
Okay.
there's also the other Sahara with Matthew McConaughey.
Right.
The treasure movie.
Yeah.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Sydney.
You've been listening to Two for the Matinee.
Join us next week when we do Payback versus Payback, the director's cut and the theatrical release of 1999's Payback, starring Mel Gibson. I'll see you when I see you.
Not if I see you first.